Then it
I
would be
noticed you
Tuesday.
postponed your many talk.
I got spooked by all the stuff that says
You're on mic.
Sorry. Come, sit.
where to.
Come, okay, come. Sorry.
After you.
Thank you. I got it next.
Where to.
Sit in. All right, good afternoon, folks, and welcome to this event on Myanmar's military and the 2015 elections. We need to start on time because it's very important that we finish on time so you can get away without getting stuck in traffic. The last thing that Carnegie wants is to have 60 people bedding down here for the night. I'm Vikram Nehru. I'm a senior associate and chair in Southeast Asian Studies here at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. This event, as probably many of you know, is part of the Myanmar Votes 2015 project that Carnegie is running, and which is co-sponsored by the Southeast Asia Studies program at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, as well as the Asia Society Policy Institute. And we are very grateful for their co-sponsorship, and we're also grateful for the support of the Japan Export Trade Organization, which supports the series. Now, may I recommend that you visit Carnegie's special website on the Myanmar Votes project. There are lots of articles, including, incidentally, one on the military and its role in the democratic transition. And if you're interested, you can also follow my tweets. In fact, there was one today on not just today's topic, but also on a recent statement by Aung San Suu Kyi, which I'm sure will come up in the course of the discussion, so I won't elaborate on it anymore. Now, about 2 months ago, we had a session in the same series, which had an all-woman panel. In fact, Kelly Curry was on that panel. She's just arrived. And she made a point of that. So today I thought we'd give the men a chance. So now today we have an all-male panel, but an outstanding one. And let me introduce them very quickly. We have Professor Weiss, who's practitioner in residence and senior associate director of the Asian and Southeast Asian Studies at SAIS, and he's a retired Air Force colonel and is a member of the Myanmar U.S. Retired Officers Military-to-Military Dialogue. We also have Renaud Egreto, who's a visiting fellow at the Wilson Center's Asia program, and he's a research associate with the Center for International Research in Paris, as well as a visiting fellow at the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore. And we have U Win Min, who is a visiting senior research fellow at the Myanmar Development Resources Institute Center for Economic and Social Development, and a senior research associate at the Wahoo Development Institute, and a journalist for the Voice of America. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Professor Weiss to start off first, and the other two as well. We'll follow with U Win Min and then Renaud. I've asked them to give some initial remarks of their thoughts on the topic. I'll ask them a few questions after they finish, and then we'll open it up to all of you for a Q&A session. And hopefully we'll finish well before or on 3:30. Professor Weiss.
Thank you, Vikram. I think it would be inappropriate for me to thank the sponsors for this event, since I am one of them. But I can thank you all very much for joining us today. It is a great delight to see so much interest in this sometimes thought to be arcane subject. Considering the amount of time that's devoted to the military, to the Myanmar military in recent years, it's surprising that we know remarkably little about this very important institution. We know that it's an army-dominated force of about 400,000 persons. Its focus is almost exclusively on internal security. It's a light infantry force engaged primarily in counterinsurgency operations. With its very small Air Force and Navy, it has no capability to project military force beyond its borders. In fact, even defending its borders is a challenge. As a result of the arms embargo of many years standing, the Myanmar armed forces rely heavily on Russia, China, and to some extent India for military equipment. In any case, our knowledge of the Myanmar military is superficial at best. Typically, the U.S. learns about the armed forces of friendly countries by establishing regular military-to-military relations. These relationships are usually comprised of things like high-level senior officer meetings, combined exercises, expert exchanges, foreign military sales, and military education and training arrangements, and so forth. We have elected not to do any of this with the Myanmar armed forces. In some circumstances, we deploy our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance resources to collect information about foreign militaries. But those resources are not only scarce and expensive, but they are now stretched beyond what most of us could comprehend. They also are focused on circumstances where foreign militaries pose threats to the United States, to our friends, or to our allies. In the case of Myanmar, it is none of the above. So we don't really know very much about the Myanmar armed forces, their leadership, how they're organized, trained, and equipped, what their capabilities, plans, and intentions are. We just don't know very much. Some argue we could or should know more. That is for another forum. What little we do know about the Tatmadaw comes from observing the Myanmar armed forces in its non-military role in politics. But I say that as an American. Is politics really a non-military role for the Tatmadaw? I think the answer is not at all. From its beginnings, the military has played an instrumental role in Myanmar politics. The Tatmadaw traces its lineage to the 1930s and claims a central role in the struggle for national independence. Since then, it has been at the fulcrum of political development in Myanmar, with the key objectives of preserving the Union and, of course, its own institutional autonomy. The thinking behind the three national causes, which date from the Ne Win era, non-disintegration of the Union, non-disintegration of national solidarity, and perpetuation of national sovereignty, undergird the connection between the Tatmadaw and the survival of the state. This relationship between soldier and state is also the basis of the strong corporate identity and the deep social bonds that make the Tatmadaw such a powerful and cohesive organization, and supports its own perception of its essentiality. Our question today, however, is what the role of the military is in the current election. What is happening now? I suspect, to no one's surprise, all sides, including the armed forces, are positioning for the November 8 vote and for the days beyond. Their goals? To ensure that their parties are ready to deliver their expected votes and, to the extent that is possible, that their opponents are not. To reassure supporters, opponents, and foreign observers that they want a fair and free election and will abide by the results, and to prepare for the crucial period after the election when the infighting and horse trading is likely to become intense. The campaign, as we all know, has begun in earnest, and politics has broken out in many places, some expected and some not. This summer, we witnessed a power struggle within the USDP that was resolved in favor of President Thein Sein and the armed forces leaders, with Shweimon ousted from party leadership, though able to retain his parliamentary position. The USDP is preparing to campaign as the party that set Myanmar on its democratic course, taking credit for the political and economic reforms put in place since 2011. Naturally, this does not sit well with some of the opposition parties who have literally bled on behalf of democratic change, nor has the USDP's supporters' suggestions that future reforms can only take place when the security situation in Myanmar improves. This recurring theme also is off-putting to many other parties. In July, again last month, and a few days ago, the Commander-in-Chief, whom I refer to out of military habit as the SINC of the Armed Forces, repeated his promise to change the constitutional requirement that 25% of the seats in Parliament be reserved for military officers. In fact, military officers that he appoints. It will change accordingly, he said in August, when peace, stability, and tranquility prevail in the country. My talks with retired senior officers suggest that this means when a successful nationwide ceasefire is in place and a political resolution of the ethnic minorities' insurgencies has occurred, a set of events that they surmise might take as much as 5 years. The SINC has also claimed on several occasions that the main concern of the Tatmadaw is for the election to be free and fair, with the outcome respected by the people, even if the NLD wins a majority. He said in August, "We will approve and support the results announced by the Union Election Board." He reiterated a few days ago his promise that the military would not intervene to change the election results. Some have given thought to the idea that the current negotiations for a nationwide ceasefire with the ethnic armed organizations might play to the advantage of the military in the election, but there's another set of thinking that sees an opposite outcome. So from where I sit and what little I have confessed that I know about the thinking, the internal thinking of the armed forces, I'm not sure how the military judges the political impact or the likely political impact of a nationwide ceasefire agreement. For her part, Aung San Suu Kyi remains reluctant to raise the anxiety level of the military any higher than it already is. The NLD released a lengthy campaign manifesto last week that did little to clarify exactly what her party would do if it wins the parliamentary election, but she did hold out an olive branch to the armed forces, calling the Tatmadaw an essential institution and indicating they, quote, shall be dignified forces that shall defend the democratic practices. This, according to Reuters. I have not read the manifesto myself. Again, Reuters says the manifesto also pledged to make the military strategically efficient. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Equip it with advanced technology, I do understand that, and include it in the executive system, which is an ambiguous formulation that is quite interesting to ponder. Campaigning this weekend, Aung San Suu Kyi said, "We want to wipe out suspicion between the NLD and the military to collaborate with mutual respect for issues of union and democracy." As I said earlier, we are all positioning ourselves to be in a circumstance to reduce the anxiety of others about what might happen were fortune to smile on us and we were electorally successful. So in sum, in my view, neither the Tatmadaw nor the NLD is showing its hand yet. We don't know enough about the armed forces to make other than intuitive judgments about their post-election behavior, reading current promises with a caution based on our observation of past practice. Aung San Suu Kyi, on the other hand, seems to be focused on calming the military about the ramifications of an NLD victory. At the same time, such a victory is unlikely to dislodge the military from its influential position in the political system and thus reduce civil-military tensions. So there's much more politics to come.
Thank you. Min-Min?
Thank you for organizing this and also having me to speak here. So I'll talk about three issues. One is how the military see the current situation before the elections, and what will the military do during the election, and what will the military do after the elections. So first, how does the military see the current situation? So for the military, like other militaries which initiated the transition from military rule to democracy, the Burmese Myanmar military also feel that they initiated this transition, so that they need to manage it in a way it is stable in their security concerns. And the military chief, General Mayon Lai, just said that last Saturday at one of the military donation ceremony about that. In terms of the stability, the way the Myanmar military see is that the transition should go step by step, gradually, which means at its own pace, not rushing at all or not going quickly. That they believe can create instability. In terms of the elections, General Mayon Lai already repeatedly stated that he will encourage free and fair elections, and he will recognize the election result. But he added one thing: he also wants to see the president who understands the military. That means a president who will not challenge the military special powers, military prerogatives in the constitution until a comprehensive peace is reached in Myanmar. That is a main security concern for the Myanmar military to be in politics, like other militaries which also intervene in politics. So in this sense, the military felt that the House Speaker, U Hsue Man, went too quickly and too far in moving the USDP, the government party, which was set up by the military, away from the military interest. So the military was very uncomfortable with that from the very beginning. And the military also believes that U Hsue Man tactfully made an alliance with Aung San Suu Kyi for his personal interest to become the next president. Actually, he was here speaking about his presidential ambition as well at the time. And the thing is that senior generals in the Myanmar military, they do not trust General Hsue Man after all, after they seen the two events that they said. One of the senior soldiers said, well, it was General Hsue Man who criticized President Thein Sein for his first meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi. The reason was the preconditions were not met. That preconditions were set by General Than Shwe. One of them is to lift the sanction before talking to Aung San Suu Kyi. But later, after Aung San Suu Kyi joined the parliament, General Hsue Man sided with her and started challenging presidents and the military's interest. So you will remember that in 2003, the parliament, actually General Hsue Man led a motion to fire the constitutional tribunal judges. So the reason was the constitutional judges ruled that parliament could not insist the minister to come and testify at the parliament because they are not at the same level. Parliamentary committees are not at the same level as the government and the ministers. So Aung San Suu Kyi also supported this move in order to reduce the judges' power and also increase the parliamentary power. But for the military, it is interference of the parliamentary in the judicial system that is making unbalanced power distribution between the two branches, even though the military see themselves, one of the branches as well. Normally, military, like other militaries in transition, they see themselves like, fourth branch of the government. They try to stay away from that. Then the military, initiated a recall bill that you remember, but the bill was not moved at all because General Hsue Man knew that he had to block that. But if that bill had, been passed, it could have been used to unseat General Hsue Man from that very beginning. Anyway, After that, last year in July, House Speaker Ushiman also allowed the constitutional amendment that could reduce the military prerogatives power to be debated and voted in the lower house. The military leadership was very angry, and they raised that recall bill again. So, why the military see General Sherman in this move as a betrayal to the military? Because there was a belief among the top generals that there was an internal pact among top 5 generals under General Tan Shui before 2011. So the pact was that they would not amend the constitution, at least for the first time. And once Ushiman, House Speaker, tried to amend the constitution, they see that General Sherman broke this promise. And plus, when transfer was power from military government to the U Thein Sein government, General Tan Shui also wished that the USDP, the government party, will run the country for the next 5 decades, together with the military. And the military finally felt that this dream was destroyed by General Sherman by dividing the party and the military. So that was end of General Sherman influence in the parliament. What I'm saying, I'm not saying the military is right, but how the military see they have managed a transition, and they don't want anyone who are in their way to maintain their military interest. Of course, Ushiman, aware of that he could be removed, by the military from his position as a USDP chairman. So he also tried to limit the influence of the military in the USDP. So what he did was he blocked many members of the military being transferred to the USDP party. And also, he blocked powerful ministers like President Office Minister U Thein and U Aw Min not to come back to the USDP by limiting their constituency. So that made not just the military, but also the executive, President U Thein Sein, angry against him, and they joined together to purge him. So after the purge, you will see that senior ministers who were just retired and senior military officers, they are like general, lieutenant general level, just retired, took powerful position in the USDP Central Executive Committee. So that's a clear sign that military, reigned in the USDP leadership. So in the beginning, the military ambition, did not stop there. They continued to purge Ushiman from the parliament, actually. They retried the recall bill again. But the problem was that as military style leadership, they kind of command the USDP MPs that USDP MPs don't like. Ushiman changed, he kind of like persuade the MPs. So these military MPs who were already, impressed with General Sherman, many of them sided with General Sherman, even the military, pressured them. So that when the bill was voted at the parliament, Ushiman won, actually. So the recall bill was postponed. Then the military realized that how much support General Sherman still have, in the party, and then they should change their way to persuading the MPs. So they tried to start, saying nicely, and helping them. Okay, we can help, you for your campaign, anything you will need, and also they toned down their criticism against General Sherman. One of the senior leaders said, well, General Sherman will continue to loyal for the party. So they were worried about the division in the USDP that can, lose more votes in the election. Nevertheless, the military appears to feel the current president, retired General U Thein Sein, so far understands the military interest much better than any other people, and also he can get international legitimacy and maintain the stability and peace process. So in a way that the military, favorite is until today is the current president. So what will the military do during the elections? Well, with 25% of the military seat, they just need only 26% for the USDP to win in the elections. Then they will be the majority. They can select the president, and they can form the government. Even for that 26%, according to the internal military sources, they are even aiming for the USDP to win only 15%. Once they win 15%, they can also organize other ethnic parties and also political parties like Farmers Party, NTF, which is against the NLD, and also individual candidates that Aung San Suu Kyi just said don't vote for them. Yeah, so they have a plan to have this 26%. I'm not sure that plan will work or not, but that's the way that they are trying to influence to win 26% for the USDP, and especially for they moved actually. They wanted to move. According to the sources at the USDP party, like 1,000 personnel from the military. But Ushuman insisted that, and they negotiated down to like 160, around that. And then down to, finally, about like 60, 67 or something, 1/3 of the finalists. So they wanted to make sure that these people will win, by making sure that these people will run in the military-dominated area, or also like border area where there are very few numbers of people, that they can send the military troops, to turn around the turn around the result, for the favor of the military. So plus, the election commission is also not sure with their voting list, and the commission chairman just admitted that he can guarantee only 30% correctness in the voting list. That means 70% is not right or not sure. Yeah, so there can be a lot of electoral fraud in favor of the military and the USDP. And Union Election Commission chairman U Tin, he tried to do his best actually to make free and fair elections, and inviting all the international observers, and convincing the people that there will be no advance votes, except for emergency duty for the military, and people who are ill, and still there will be check and monitoring process. So it was very convincing for me. But still, the military may tell him, well, these are the area that security is not good. Then Utin A, the chairman of the election commission, may have difficult time to resist that, not to hold election in a certain place that military thinks they may not win. Okay, so the last thing is that military will also continue to keep lines or allow the Buddhist nationalist movement, Mabata, to continue to call, against voting Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD. That means that they will have, USDP party will have more chance to win elections. Okay, so the last question, what will the military do after the elections? So I think it has been very clear. The main thing is to influence the election process in a way that they can select the president. It doesn't matter if they win the majority. They believe that they may not win the majority this time. Aung San Suu Kyi's popularity is so huge in the country that she will win a majority. But because of the 25% military seats, they understood they just need 26% to win. And if their USDP party win together with the other parties, the 26%, then they will choose the president. But even if they don't win the 26%, they can still select the military presidential candidate, appoint. And then that military presidential candidate, will be one of the three presidential candidates, to run for the presidency. Then the military can still influence certain parties, certain individual candidates, and including the ethnic parties, by pressuring them, by bribing them, by putting them, in the government to choose their military presidential candidate to become the president. Okay, so if finally they cannot do anything, they will still negotiate with the opposition party, Aung San Suu Kyi, not to challenge their military interest and to share power if possible. That means there will be kind of like coalition government. If not, they may still allow the NLD to run the elections, to run the government, but they may not obey all the new president's order. So, for example, they may go and attack ethnic areas to create instability, and they will influence policies through the National Defense and Security Council, where they have a dominant position. So, some people are worried about a coup, but so far, General Myanmar said just yesterday he met, just 2 days ago, he met press people, and he said he will not stage a coup, and he will recognize the election result. So I don't feel that there will be a coup right after the election. They will wait and see. But I won't rule out that they may stage a coup when the time comes that that they are also expecting that, after a certain time, then people may, lose their hope, from Aung San Suu Kyi, even though she promised she cannot deliver. Then they will think that will be the good time. They can create more instability, and they can stage a coup like in Thailand. But General Myanmar has been going to Thailand for many times. Yeah, that we're going to amend the constitution and wait for the elections, and so he will wait and then for such a time that he can intervene. So to conclude everything, of course, the military will influence the entire election process from the beginning to the end in a way to be able to select the president that they want. That means to make sure the next government will not challenge their military prerogatives, but work closely tied to the military and continue to maintain their military interest and military special powers, military prerogatives in the constitution until a comprehensive peace is reached. That is their main concern, which is civil war. That they normally, give the reason that these are the main reason for them. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Winman. Renaud.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you again for the invitation. So it's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to continue this broad introduction with a focus on the role of the military in the parliament. We're all talking about the upcoming elections, but there are MPs in Myanmar, legislative bodies at the union level as well as the provincial level that are not elected and that will not be running for office this coming November. So I would like to focus on this particular group of parliamentarians and this particular aspect of military intervention into policymaking that the Tatmadaw, the Burmese army, has been increasingly focusing on. So as you know, the Constitution, the 2008 Constitution, allows for the appointment of military delegates in Parliament at the union level, so in both houses of Pidong Suluto, the Union Parliament. The Constitution says not more than 110 MPs, military MPs, so it's not exactly 25% that the Constitution stipulates. So 110 MPs in the lower house and 56 MPs in the upper house, as well as 222 MPs in the 14 state and region Hlutos parliaments. Unlike their civilian colleagues, so these MPs can be removed and can be substituted by the commander-in-chief. The elected MPs are elected for 5-year terms, but not those military MPs. We have seen over the past few sessions a lot of those MPs being replaced and removed and sent back to their former military units. Military MPs usually, not always, but usually sit together in assemblies in one of the 4 blocks of chairs in those assemblies. So that really provides, because of course they all sit in uniforms, so that really provides a visual expression of the presence of the military, of the army, inside a state institution. All debates are broadcast also, and so that really adds to the these visual expressions. So in my latest research, I've been looking at what these military MPs have been doing in Parliament, especially at the union level, to which I was granted a quite regular access. How do they behave? What do they do there? What is their role? Do they perform those basic legislative functions as other civilian elected MPs do? Who are they also? What is their profile? Is there a specific profile for those military MPs? And would there be in coming legislatures a pattern of recruitment of these MPs? And this to understand more broadly how the military construe its presence and role in a legislative and lawmaking institution, which is quite an unusual arrangement. There are only a few other examples of authoritarian or military regimes arranging for those military representation in parliaments. China, for instance, is an example. Indonesia before 2004. Thailand also on a regular basis, and a few African countries as well. But it's relatively rare to see active duty officers sitting in parliament and acting as lawmakers. So these military MPs mostly are assigned three main functions in the current parliament, in the union level parliament. First and foremost, what Ko Win-min mentioned this a bit, is the protection of the Constitution. This is one specific article of the Constitution, and definitely the military MPs are there in the two chambers to protect, to safeguard, as it is written in the Constitution, the spirit, the letter of the 2008 Constitution. And we saw that last June. They are ready to use that veto power whenever needed. Second is, as also Ko Win-min mentioned, is the selections of one of the three presidential nominees, which is really important, and we will see that later on, early next year, in January and February, when the position of the two speakership as well as the three presidential cabinet will be selected, and the politicking will be really starting. And third function, and this is really interesting, this is where we see that now the Burmese military really seems to be willing and even ready to engage in more subtle, in more sophisticated intervention into policymaking, into politics, basically. And basically, the army wants to be involved in legislative debates, in lawmaking. And there I would differ a bit with Ko Win-min, but I think that the military MPs and the army in parliament rather wants to position itself, and that really pops up in every public speeches and public statements or interviews with these senior army officers. But the army really wants to position itself as a referee within parliament, and not really as an active lawmaking force. The army wants to be there in parliament just to check what is going on, what is debated, but not to produce new legislations, to be an active lawmaker. Lawmaking is not the core function that the military is assigned to inside the parliament, especially at the union level parliament. We should remember that the constitutions has shaped a presidential system. So the drafting of bills is mostly left to the executive, to the government, to ministries, including the three ministries that are left to the authority of the army. So the Defense Ministry, the Home Affairs Ministry, and Border Affairs Ministry. So when the army wants to pass a law and want to produce a new legislation related to its own interest, it first goes through those ministries, but not through the military MPs. I'm still working on it, but I would assume that between 80 and 90% of the new legislation that have been passed over the past 4 years in Myanmar by the parliament were first initiated by the government, not by the MPs, whether elected MPs or military MPs. So when you look at what kind of bill the military MPs have drafted, and only a few have been actually. A few MPs, military MPs, have been active in the matter, but it was only on matters related to the Myanmar language, the use of the Myanmar language in local media, or grammar issue, but definitely not on political issues and or even security issues. This is really left to the government and the army ministers within the government. So clearly, those 25% military MPs have not been high-flying, hyperactive MPs inside the parliament, contrary to many of their civilian elected colleagues, including retired military officers who from the USDP. But they have rather acted as what we commonly call a backbencher, low-profile backbenchers. And they might not go beyond that backbencher role in upcoming legislatures unless, and this is quite important and quite likely, these new legislatures become highly fragmented and volatile. And I just need to go back to the 1950s to see that this is a strong possibility. And unless a significant block of MPs, elected MPs, or the government, the forthcoming government after 2015, after 2020 and beyond, start to, as Ko-Win said, openly and regularly and strongly challenge the position of the military, the preserves of the military inside the parliament and beyond the parliament. Then the military MPs may start to intervene more directly in parliament and to become more active and to produce on their own new legislations to counter legislations proposed by elected MPs or by a government that would be more openly hostile to the military's agenda. And we all know that this is quite likely after 2015 and beyond. And so that would indicate that we will certainly continue to see men in uniform in the parliament in upcoming legislatures for a quite number of years. But I guess that now we can discuss this further on. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to all three of you for your initial remarks. Actually, I want to come back to you, Renaud, just apropos your last statements. First of all, you focus a lot on the 25% military presence, those in uniform. But how many members of parliament are there who are ex-military in the USDP? Is that also a very large proportion? Do you have any specific numbers from your research?
Indeed, and it's quite interesting to see that currently in both chambers of the national parliament, of the union parliament, less than 10% of the elected MPs, so the 75%, have a military background, broadly speaking. From the army, the navy, the air force, can include also the police as well. But it's less than 60 MPs, union-level MPs, that boast a military background, that come from the army, which is relatively few. You find far more retired military officers in the government. More than half of the current government is made of retired military officers. You find far more retired army officers in the administration as well. But not in the parliament. One of the reasons also is many retired army officers were elected in 2010, but many were transferred to the government, were appointed as ministers, chief ministers also in one of the 14 regional governments, or the Union Election Commission, for instance. Routine A, the chair was elected in 2010, but was soon after transferred as the chairman, appointed as the chairman of the Election Commission. So compared to the morning after the 2010 election, there are less MPs, elected MPs with a military background. But nonetheless, it's quite interesting to see that you don't find a big contingent of ex-army officers. That said, most of those retired generals and colonels have managed to secure most position of authority within the legislatures. Both speakers are ex-military people. Most of the parliamentary committee chairs are ex-military people. The secretary also of these chairs. The chairman, because it's only men, not chair, there's only retired women officers, but are also president of commission within the parliament. So despite this low number, they have been managed to...
They're in very powerful positions.
To secure quite a lot of high-profile positions. And we can expect this to be observed also after 2015.
Great. I have a question for you, Owen, about the retired military officers who are not in parliament and not in government. You know, the Tan Shui sort of shadow which lurks in the background. How powerful are they? How many are they? How unified are they? Because is the military really a unified bloc? Or are there different interests which may be competing one against the other? Are there perhaps different regional interests that could potentially sort of break up the unity within the military? Do you have any information about that?
It has been very clear, the military is not unified. You can see that, along the way, many top leaders were pushed, including, their troops, below them. For example, the recent one, you can see General Kenyon. The whole military intelligence was sacked. Before that, General Tim Wu, the whole military intelligence was sacked. And after what you can also see that Vice President Deng Wu, who was also a powerful military general, was also sacked. That helped Wu Sing to move quickly with this transition. And lately, we could see General Xu Man. So they have, different attitude toward the transition in terms of the pace of the transition, how quickly and how far. Even today, there are ministers who want to, go with the peace process very quickly, but the military is still wanting to go, in slow pace. So you can see the differences, but always, there are. In Thailand, there's a king, but in Myanmar, we have either U Ne Win or U Tan Shui, who stay behind, but they have a lot of influence to make sure, they are kind of working together, even though they are not united. So, for example, now, General Xu Man was pushed, right? But he did not really rebel against, and he also, tried to stop bigger split in the USDP. So I think that is influence from General Tan Shui. So he still has, I think, influence, but he will not say, exactly you do what and you do what, but he will say, just, maintain the unity among yourself and, make sure the USDP, will continue to go down well in the history. So that's kind of thing. But people interpret it in their own way to do their activities.
But why didn't General Xu Man's purge follow the playbook of previous purges? In other words, he was removed from the chairmanship of the USDP, but he stayed in Parliament. He remained Speaker of the House. He was there then to battle this bill that came to Parliament, and he won. Why didn't the military remove him altogether from the scene? What stopped them from doing that?
They wanted to. They tried afterward, but they could not. They realized that there were, MPs, even USDP MPs, supporting from Xu Man's side. Actually, these generals, currently retired, they're like general, lieutenant general, right? So they're so powerful when we have this kind of level, and they, kind of order, but the MPs did not listen to them, and they vote against their recall bill. So they realized they can't do it. Yeah. So that they stopped there. Plus, there are certain people in the government who also see that if they go too far, it will be going against the constitution. Like one of the is getting out of the party politics. Internal party politics, that's fine. International may not criticize them. But if you go beyond that, that violates the constitution, then they are worried that army itself has been cherishing the constitution, right? Maintaining is our main duty, so that they don't want to go beyond that.
Bill, do you want to comment on that? Or
I was simply going to add that when you look at the Myanmar military in answering that question, you have to recognize there is a political answer that encompasses relationships among the elite or the upper echelons of military leadership around specific interests or issues. And there is the broader sociological phenomenon of internal cohesion in the military that is extraordinary. So you can differ on, as you clearly stated, you can differ on some interest or issue-oriented problems, but the overall cohesion of the force, created by its ability to socialize officers into a lifetime of solidarity, is quite extraordinary. And it is so powerful, it is unlikely to be dislodged by one particular problem.
Yep.
Just would like to add something. We should note that we are nonetheless in a different situation right now compared to, let's say, 5 years ago. It's not a military regime anymore. It's not a clearly visible chain of command. Schuman is not part of the army. He retired long ago. So the purge is a bit more, to consider this as a purge from the army is wrong. Schuman was purged from the USDP, but we used the example of the 1990s or 2000s when the military regime was clearly run by the army. It was easy to purge its own member, Kenyant, for instance. Now it's different because they do not belong to the army anymore. Those retired officers, the elected MPs, the ministers, except the 3 army ministers. So it's a bit more complicated for the army leadership to purge them technically. And just to add also on Bill Wise, we should note that those purges in Myanmar historically, since the late 1940s, have always been conducted from the top. It has always been a top-down thing. Except they win in 1949 and Tanchwe in 1992. But otherwise, it's always the top that purges the bad lot. And it's not a younger generation of officers. It's not a rival clan that attempts to conduct the purge. It's always from the top.
But I want to come back to you. I really found your initial remarks really interesting. The 400,000 strong army and the fact that the other forces are not particularly strong, light infantry, and the fact that it's really focused on counterinsurgency. Now, one of the responsibilities of the military during the election is going to be maintaining security on election day and run up to the elections, but on election day itself. If you read the Carter Center's report on their current assessment of the state of preparedness for the elections, they raise concerns about the military's ability. They don't see any plan in place to maintain security during the election process. Right? How capable do you think the military is going to be to do that? And do you have any worries that, when you don't have a military that is capable, or a police that is capable, that they might become heavy-handed? This might actually add to a potential circle of violence during the election. What is your assessment?
Well, first, I have not read the Carter Center report, so I am at a disadvantage in knowing exactly what difficulties they highlighted. But I can imagine what it is that they concluded, and it may, perhaps it was not that the military is not widely dispersed enough to maintain order, but rather that it is the territorial sense of the military is so powerful so strong that it is only the military and the police, which, as we should bear in mind, are under the control of the military at the end of the day, that the military and police are too powerful in too many places, especially in conflict areas or semi-conflict areas. But again, I don't know exactly what it was that they said. I would be, in general terms, I would be concerned broadly about the ability of the forces of law and order to act in a fashion to safeguard the election. But I have no specific knowledge of something different eventuating.
The Carter Center doesn't give any detail. They just make this point. And so I was wondering whether there was any further basis. All right, let's open it up to Q&A from the audience. I already see a few hands up. Let's have Priscilla clap first. Priscilla, wait till you get a mic because this is being videoed and recorded. A microphone here. Please introduce yourself as well as the organization you represent.
I'm Priscilla Clapp with USIP and Asia Society. I just want to pick up on that last point you were discussing about election security. Is this on?
Yes.
There has been a lot of work on this, and international organizations have been involved in it. I don't know what the Carter Center said or why they didn't know about it. How old is the report that you read?
Oh, it's quite recent.
Yeah. At any rate, the main burden is on the police, not the military. The police, the border affairs, the border forces, and the police are adding auxiliary, like 40,000 extra police to man the polls. The military, when I was there in July and we met with the Minister of Defense and very senior leaders, they said that they will only be involved in election security if they are called in specifically by local leaders. You also have to count on the GAD. The Ministry of Home Affairs has...
The GAD is the General Administration Department.
Department of the Ministry of Home Affairs. These people are ex-military. They are the staff for the UEC at the local level. So they're going to be part of the whole structure. But you're not going to see the military, the uniformed military out there securing the elections. It's going to be the police.
Thanks.
Just to add on that.
Let's have Renaud first, then we'll come to Kelly.
Over the past 6 months, there have been a lot of meetings between the Army, the police, and the Union Election Commission in Naypyidaw. So there might not be a big plan, but they have been discussing about security during the elections for a long time within the inner circles in Naypyidaw.
Yeah, they are worried about the security problems because there will be, they expect more tension than any elections in Burma, Myanmar, because of more freedom, that people will talk more openly. So not just at the time of campaigning, but also at the time of selecting at the time of announcing the result and at the time of selecting the president. So these three areas. So now they are planning to train civilians for temporary policing for the electoral and until the presidential election period. And the 40,000 civilians will be trained for 2 weeks. Yes.
Kelly.
That's exactly what I want to pick up on. A lot of the, my name's Kelly Curry with Project 2049 Institute. A lot of the civil society people that I work with are very concerned about where these 40,000 civilians, and I'm using little air quotes around that word, are going to come from, because the military, the Tatmadaw has a long history of relationships with quasi official paramilitary organizations that it uses to terrorize the population, suppress dissent, and all sorts of other nasty things. And these include the fire brigades, the Red Cross, and the Swanashin. And I think a lot of people are very concerned that those dark currents are going to be resuscitated or reinvigorated to form the basis of the security apparatus around the elections, and that this will lead not to security but to intimidation. And I think you have a very fine line between security and intimidation. Actually, it's pretty, I'm not sure that the line even exists in the mind of the authorities, but I think that this is an issue I'd like to hear from the panel on.
Thank you very much. Do any of you want to respond to that, about the line between intimidation or security and intimidation? It was certainly one of the issues underlying my question. I guess people agree with you, so let's move on.
I would
Yeah?
just say I stand by my ignorance.
Please.
Hi, I'm Megan Stewart with the Public International Law and Policy Group. One of the key issues on the agenda for Burma is clearly the nationwide ceasefire accord. Right now, the ethnic armed organizations are deciding whether or not they want to sign that NCA as it stands, or whether they want to negotiate for additional changes. One of the questions that they are currently asking in that analysis is whether or not they would be better off signing with the current government, or whether they'd be better off waiting for the potential change in government if they would get a better deal. But their concern is how the military might respond under an NLD-led government if the NLD were to win. And so it'd be interesting to hear the analysis from the panel on how the military may respond to an NLD-led government potentially trying to renegotiate the NCA or some of the terms.
I'm not sure that the military really envision an NLD-led government. Many are still pretty confident that either the current administration or someone which is closely associated with the current government can form the next government after January or February. So, but clearly the military does not want to let other institutions negotiate on its behalf any dealing with the ethnic armed group. This is one of the key issues that the military is looking at, and does not want anybody else to cope with, to deal with.
Does anybody else want to take that? Yes?
I think it is better, to sign now than, waiting for the next government, because at the moment, even though, military chief, General Min Aung Hlaing, wanted to fight all the ethnic groups, rather than negotiating with them, he somehow listened to the president to a certain extent, in my observation. But if the new government is not from the military and doesn't have that, military, order relations and respect, I'm worried that he may not listen to that president. And Aung San Suu Kyi, even though she started, telling the ethnic groups not to sign, rushly, but she changed her tone in the last, I think 2 days ago, campaign message, from the state media, that it is better to sign the NCA now, and the next process, discussion about the politics, should be, sent to the hands of the next government. So I think that's the good sign for all sides, and the government also wanted to make sure that it is signed before the elections. So they are planning to sign it on October 10, and they're going to discuss on October 3 for that. And the thing is, they are trying to go to the political framework dialogue, which is, I think, more significant than ceasefire agreement itself. We had a ceasefire in the past for many times, but broke, because we didn't have that political dialogue. Because this time, President U Thein Sein is very committed, to go onto that, political path and federalism, so that I think it is better to sign now than waiting. And it seems like Aung San Suu Kyi came to understand that NCA is just ceasefire, not peace settlement. That this government will get legitimacy for the elections now, so that she may also encourage the NCA. I think it is better to sign it now so that the process will continue. Otherwise, you have to be worried about that. You'll start the whole process all over again. For the military, I mean, they like kind of Sri Lanka option, wiping out all the ethnic armies.
So Win-Win is quite right. Last night, Aung San Suu Kyi gave a televised address to the nation, actually, as it turned out. It was on television, and her tone was quite different. And she made this very clear that if the NLD were to be elected, they would abide by the ceasefire agreement, they would push for the political agreement. So implicit in those words were that that she was okay if a ceasefire agreement were to be signed. I found that a very interesting tone. The other small point is, when you talked about Min Aung Hlaing, it's interesting that when the ethnic armed groups and 6 of them came to the president just the other day to try and decide what were the next steps, and they've decided in October to meet and hopefully sign the agreement, that precisely at that time, Min Aung Hlaing decides to go to Israel to purchase weapons. And that wasn't a good signal coming from the army. And I want to, was that timing just happenstance, or was it meant to be a preordained signal? What do you think?
What happened was the government asked the ethnic parties to come earlier when Min Aung Hlaing was in the country. He planned that for 2 months before.
So it was a sheer coincidence, was it?
Yeah, he did not intentionally do that, but he already planned that 2 months ago.
Okay.
But the ethnic groups came late. But the problem is still, he can still postpone, and the president should, insist that he stayed, because that would lose a lot of credibility, in terms of trust building with ethnic groups. So the main thing that ethnic groups were trying to ask is, well, if these groups, certain group cannot sign, Kokhan, all these 3 groups, right? So, well, can you guarantee, President, that military will not fight, all these groups? President verbally agreed, but Min Aung Hlaing always does something against, something different. So ethnic groups doesn't have, faith in the president, actually. So that they want to make sure Min Aung Hlaing is, in that meeting to make sure that promise from him, but he wasn't there.
Bill, you want to answer?
I did. The trip to Israel is a very important and in some respects curious development, but I don't think it is at all related to counterinsurgency issues, primarily because Israel doesn't produce for Myanmar the kinds of weapon systems that would be appropriate for them to employ in that situation. What Israel does well is the very things that the Tatmadaw has just recently come to grips with. They produce weapon systems that can build air and naval capability. So when I look at the trip to Israel like this, I see Min Aung Hlaing's comment that his goal is to build a more standard Myanmar military, I take that to mean he is already planning for what the NLD has proposed, that the military become more focused on external defense, a more normal military entity.
Excellent point. Thank you.
I agree to that point. Min Aung Hlaing has been talking a lot about the standard army.
There's Prashant, right here. Welcome to you.
Prashant from the Diplomat magazine. I'm wondering if I could push the panel on 2 questions. The first was I liked U Win Min's scenarios that you laid out in terms of how much of the vote that the military might get. So I'm wondering if I could get you to be a little bit more specific, and maybe other members of the panel could comment as well, because I see maybe 4 scenarios. So one is they win 26% of the vote, and together with the 25%, they get the majority. Another one is that they somehow get some kind of agreement with the other parties to get the sufficient votes. And then if not, they'll come up with some kind of deal. Or if not, they'll try to work out something with the ruling government and try to undermine it in some way. My question would then be, what are the probabilities for these various scenarios, and are there differences within the panel members about how these scenarios might play out? Then my second question, which I guess is more hypothetical.
Prashant, let's wait for that one because it's a complicated question. We'll come to your second, okay. I promise you. Yep. We won't leave you, but let's answer that question first. Otherwise, I worry that the panel might forget. What's your response in a brief?
Well, military always, plan and calculate, and, they have strategy and like plan A, plan B, plan C, normally. But I'm not sure that will really happen or not, even though they planned. Many authoritarian regime fall, they thought they would win elections and they did it and they didn't win, right? So these things will really happen or not, I'm not sure. But this time, what they are saying differently is that, before, they did not organize the, military pooling tightly, and they did not really give, order or organizing. But now they are going to convince the military personnel that if NLD win, military interests will be destroyed. So now they say, well, many military personnel are convinced that they should vote against the NLT because, all their military prerogatives, their license. Even though Aung San Suu Kyi said a very good thing about the military, to work with the military and, like to promote, but she doesn't say anything about the, welfare of the soldiers, which is the most important thing, which is the military state can continue to influence the military, your welfare, these things, military business, what we just try, so that they have more worry this time that military personnel may be voting for the USDP. So that's the only difference for me. Also, the same thing happened, their polling will be inside the military. Yeah. And also, if you look at really real numbers, they don't need to win a lot, actually, because there will be 3 vice presidents if you really calculate into the details, right? So at the last time of the presidential election, I think they have like 664 or 646 or something, no? So Thein Sein got like almost 400, and then another vice president got like 150, and the other one get like 50. So if the vote is going to split like that, you see, upper house one, lower house one, right? So then the winner may not need a lot of vote, actually. Let's say like 644, like 333, right? So to get the majority. And you already have the military like 167, right? So you just need like 150 around that. You see that? And then 150, you still have your alliance and ethnic groups, right? Like, in Kachin, the military have the people militia and their own party, right? Then individual, candidates, right? And also NDF, Farmers Party, all these things. They can get, other. So if they win, let's say like 90 seats, and then they are in a position, to be able to select the president, I think.
Okay, let the others chime in. Bill, what's your response?
Well, I often, as you know very well, caution my students not to engage in speculative or hypothetical analyses except when they're in possession of valid empirical data. I got none.
Renaud?
Well, I also don't read tea leaves, so I won't speculate. But just one point. I think we should not take for granted the fact that the military will always work hand in hand with the USDP. We already saw that in the past. There have been a lot of disagreements. The military does not really trust the USDP is a melting pot of interest. It's not only made of retired military officials, but businessmen, local cronies, local ethnic leaders as well. So we always mention the military-backed USDP, but I'm not sure about that. And I think that we should not consider the USDP and the military as strong ally within the parliament and outside the parliament.
Prashant, we'll come back. What's your second question? Just wait. Yep.
Yeah, so the second question, just a quick one, and maybe it's too hypothetical or optimistic, but I think all the presenters have sort of presented a very strong picture of the military in terms of the various levers of power that they have, and I think even the parliamentary representatives, there was the idea that perhaps their power could even grow in a more fragmented parliament, which is maybe one of the likely scenarios. I'm just wondering if we're trying to envision the military's role weakening over time, or at least reducing to a certain extent, how do we even go about thinking about that if we don't have the constitutional changes and that remains further out, 5 years? What are some of the other indicators we look for in terms of how the military's role might be reduced, if any? Thanks.
Oh, that's a big question. Okay, let's try and keep our responses short because there are others who want to ask questions. So, Renaud, you want to start with that, and then we'll come to you, Bill, and we'll go to...
I don't want to be pessimistic, but it will, of course, come from within the army, within the new generation of leaders. And if there is one area where the military can reduce its influence or relinquish some of its control, as I'm looking at the parliament, it's in the local parliament, in the 14 regional parliament. If the military wants to start withdrawing its presence, they may start with those officers in the local parliament, because this is where nothing much is happening. And the key function is within the national parliament, constitutional matters. But in local parliaments, maybe in upcoming legislatures it might be possible to reduce the number or disengage for the military.
Bill?
I think it might be useful to reiterate what we have said in little pieces about the actual power that the Myanmar military has. It is the commander-in-chief of the military, not the president, who is the supreme commander of the armed forces of Myanmar. So when we talk about orders that a new president might give to the commander-in-chief, politicians can give them all the orders they wish. The Constitution gives them exclusive authority for command and control, for command of the armed forces, including the police and the paramilitary forces. Second, the military controls the National Defense and Security Council through its ability to appoint a majority of the 11 members, and it is the National Defense and Security Council that ostensibly sets national security policy, especially policy affecting the armed forces. Third, the military nominates, as we have said, 3 cabinet ministers: Defense, Home Affairs, and Border Affairs. That is an exclusive responsibility granted by the Constitution to the military. Fourth, of course, there is the parliamentary opportunity of nominating 25% of the parliament. But more important than just that 25%, it's what is the power that 25% gives to the military, because that is sufficient to block constitutional change, which many people who observe the political system think is a necessary step in the democracy process. And lastly, of course, the military does have its ability to produce its own candidate for president through this complicated system that the Myanmar Constitution prescribes. So those are 5 areas where the military has significant power, and none, as far as I can tell, none of those 5 areas are at risk as a consequence of this election.
Right. I just want to also point out, Prashant, that in the case of Indonesia, it took several decades under President Suharto for a gradual reduction of the presence of the military in parliament. And it was when he felt comfortable enough to do it. It came from the top. It was a top-down process. There wasn't pressure to do this. So it was when they were comfortable with the transition to democratic rule that it actually occurred. All right, let's continue. We have to move on. Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
I am Sangpan, ethnic Kachins from the north. I'm currently working with UK Embassy in Yangon as senior political advisor. My questions to the panel is that I would like to ask a question regarding with the ethnic minority issue, which is always being a stepchild issue of the country. With that said, with this purposely and systematic exclusions to be able to participate in political structure, how would you think, would that be sustainable politically and economically if this exclusion is exercising in the future?
So you're concerned about whether the ethnic groups will be included politically as well as economically in a post-2015 Myanmar.
Yes, you're right.
That's your issue. Okay.
Thanks.
Bill, why don't you start and then we'll move to U Win Min.
Off the top of my head, I do not know, because it's a speculation that I can't support with facts. My surmise is that when there is a final political resolution, that roles for all the parties will be clearly stated in a way that all can agree to, and that those roles prescribed in a final political resolution may offer the opportunities that you described, or that you wish for, I should say.
I think there will be more inclusion in the future, even though we expect more powerful ethnic political parties in the local level before the 2010 elections, but it didn't really happen because you really need unity among all the ethnic parties in the local area, like strongmen, right? So that why the Myanmar parliament was very powerful was because of Shriman and his influence, and so he opened up a way, and but in the ethnic level, states, even the regional division, I do not see the powerful, dynamic people, moving the parliamentary, very powerful, and like inclusiveness. Like if you look at Shan, there are two main parties, like Mon, two parties, right? Also Kachin, there are like different parties, right? So I think unity of the ethnic groups is also very important to influence the Burman politics. So far, only Yakai parties were merged, but they are merging, not for good reason, but to fight Rohingya. So they can still split afterward. But that unity, I think, leadership is very important. And the second thing is that this election, different from the last one, nobody will win the majority. I mean, even though NLD will win the majority, it may not be enough to set up the government. The same thing with the government, I already explained. So ethnic people may not be the king, but they can be the kingmaker. The party that they join will be able to form the government, take that initiative, and then have like ethnic alliance group. Then you will have more influence, and you will be like ministers in the next government.
So generally, a positive response, people feeling a bit optimistic. What about you, Renaud?
Just to follow up on this relative optimism, but when you see the number of political parties with an ethnic base that have been created over the past few weeks or months, and the number of ethnic candidates for the current, with the upcoming elections, you can be relatively optimistic. There is a demand among ethnic groups to join the ongoing political process. There will be more political leaders involved in discussions, in the dialogue after 2015, within the parliament or outside the parliament. The civil society has its role, but it's a gradual process. But we nonetheless can be relatively optimistic.
At the back.
So I'm also former NLD member. 2 questions. One is, what do you think about WA's statement on last September 4th? WA said they cannot participate in ceasefire agreement because they have already promised Union government not to participate in that ceasefire agreement because Western countries, especially EU, US, Japan, involved in that process. China don't need Western country involved, so they cannot sign agreement. What do you think? And 2 question is, if WA, AIA, AA, TNLA, SSP North, RCSS, NNSP, KNPP will not participate in that ceasefire agreement, can it call the nationwide ceasefire agreement? 2 questions. Thanks.
Right. I think you're the person to answer this question.
Yeah, WA has been very, strong to continue their, kind of autonomy that they are enjoying now. They even don't want the, NCA and afterward that they will have to share, their resources and power. So they will resist, NCA as much as they can. And they felt like they already signed the peace and political, agreement, which is just giving autonomy to them. So they are not interested in NCA at all. Plus, the Myanmar military feel that, they have support from China, so that they cannot really touch, WA much at this time. So WA may not be part of the NCA for sure. And other ethnic groups also, they also did not organize WA to be part of the NCA. And WA even told them that, our main aim is to have the WA state. You see that? So for WA, they wanted to have more autonomous state in the political agreement. So for second question, you cannot call it nationwide, ceasefire agreement. So, but you can call it nation part ceasefire agreement.
Okay, but we shouldn't get too hung up on semantics here. But yes, to a large extent, even though there are a few groups that may be outside, it's still pretty much a nationwide effort. Listen, it's coming to 3:30. I promised that I'd close the meeting by 3:30. I apologize to those who wanted to ask questions but were excluded. But the panel is here, so feel free to approach them after the meeting. And by all means, raise these questions with them and continue the discussion. But I must draw it to a close. Thank you very much for coming, for being such an engaged audience. And please join me in thanking the panel for excellent presentations. Thank you very much.